So consider the functions f and g, where f goes from r plus to r, and f of x is x squared plus 2x, and then g goes from reals to positive reals, where g of x is x squared plus 3. So now I have to evaluate the different options. First one is f is 1 to 1. So f is x squared plus 2x. So to recap, what one-to-one functions mean is that you have something that always looks like this. So every output is only mapped to by at most once, which means you're not gonna have this scenario where two different inputs have the same output. So this isn't gonna happen if f is 1 to 1. So f is x squared plus 2x. So typically, when you see squared, that means that because you have positive numbers and negative numbers having the same square, it typically is not 1 to 1. But because we have that the domain is R plus, that means we're only restricted to positive numbers. Any positive number is gonna have a different x squared value, and then similarly, it's also gonna have a different 2x values. When you sum that up, x squared plus 2x is gonna be different for different inputs. So we can say that f is 1 to 1. Okay. G, whether G is on to. Okay. So for a function to be on to, everything in the codomain must be mapped to by the domain or in the domain. Um, it's okay if there's like multiple different values in the domain that's mapping to the same output. That is allowed, but we don't want to have, we cannot have any lonely elements in the codomain. So everything should be partnered up. So maybe you have something that's like this. Basically, there's no like leftover elements in the codomain. So now is G onto. So G is an x squared plus 3 function, and we know that the domain goes from real numbers to positive real numbers. So because we have that the codomain is positive reals, so it's fine that we have an x squared over here. Because if the codomain wasn't positive reals, then x squared is always going to output a positive number, which means that if there was also negative numbers in the codomain, those wouldn't get mapped to. But we don't have to worry about that because the codomain is R plus. But what happens is my x squared number is always gonna be greater than or equal to 0. And then we add a 3 to that. So this value is always gonna be greater than or equal to 3. No matter what x you put in, you're never gonna get anything between 0 to 3. Um, and so this would not be, this function is not an onto function. Okay, so then they want us to check if f of g of x is 1 to 1. Um, okay, so we know that, okay, so f of g of x means that this function would be going from real numbers um, to real numbers because the domain of this function would be the domain of g, and the codomain of this function would be the codomain of f. So that means that this function would have both the domain and codomains of r to r. Okay, so now would this function be 1 to 1? This wouldn't be because for different values of x from real numbers, we're gonna get the same value for x squared plus 3 because both positive and negative would give the same x squared. And so now you have the same input that goes into f, which would obviously give you the same output. So this would no longer be 1 to 1 because what is happening is you have two different inputs in G that goes to the same output, and now we have, yeah. So because of this, this is not a one-to-one function. Okay. Now is g of f of x 1 to 1. So g of f of x means that now we have the domain of f, which is r plus, and the codomain of g, which is also r plus. So now is this function going to be 1 to 1? So we know f of x is 1 to 1. Um, f of x is 1 to 1, that's been discussed earlier. Um, and then with that input, is g also gonna be 1 to 1? Yes, because if I put in a positive, if x squared plus 3, if that can only take in positive numbers, that means that x squared plus 3 is always gonna be give you different outputs for different inputs. So this would also be 1 to 1. Okay, now is g of f of x onto for g of f of x to be onto, again, this function has goes from r plus to r plus, which means that, okay, so the same issue that we had discussed above still holds, because if I have anything that's like, so suppose if my x value is 0.5, x squared plus 2x is gonna give me something that is, I don't even want to compute that honestly. But basically any number that is in between, because this goes from r plus to r plus. Any number that's in between 0 comma 3 is never in the codomain is never gonna get mapped to.